Rugby Championship team of the tournament, folks. Going to pick 23 guys as opposed to 15. Go through some kind of key stats and moments and whatnot from the Rugby Championship. Have a little talk about like where the Southern Hemisphere does have a heap of depth and where are we a little light. And you guys can let us know your thoughts on who you would have. I've had a look at a couple of teams that are already out. Rugby Planet has got one out. The Raw has got one out. They're all kind of going to be much of a muchness with the same names kind of banded about. It's just kind of which ones you pick, to be honest. So I guess that's the name of the game, isn't it? Also, if you want rugby jerseys, check out Lovell Rugby. Lovell Rugby's got loads of them. All Blacks gear, South African gear, club teams. Heaps of them. Link in the description there and affiliate of the channel. Happy times. We'll start with some props. And maybe a little bit of a left field one. But I went with old Thomas Gajo from the Pumas. Probably a little bit of an unorthodox pick. But when I had a look at his stats, I was going to pick him as my bench guy. But when I had a look at his stats, I couldn't not pick the dude, man. He's got the most run meters, the most defenders beaten, the most tries of all the old loose heads. 10 defenders beaten. The next best one is 4. Now, that's not why you pick your props, but I honestly think his scrummaging came along pretty well. I mean, his defensive numbers are really good. He's getting like 9 tackles a game. He's tackling up in the 90s for his percentage? But also his scrummaging. Like, if he's getting dominated, his penalty count's going to be high. He concedes 4 in 5 games. Remember, he has a mixture of games from the bench and starting. The other guy I went with is Stephen Kitsoff. Stephen Kitsoff is my bench guy. Ideally, you'd probably want to start Kitsoff and then go Gajo on the bench. But both of those guys for their teams play kind of bench roles and starting roles respectively. So, I mean, Kitsoff had the most turnovers won for a loose head prop. Only conceded 2 penalties in 6 games. Kitsoff was also a proper unit. But starting guy, I went with Gajo as a little bit of a flair pick for a prop. How do I reckon the Southern Hemisphere teams are doing for loose head props? Not too bad. I don't know that we have any kind of hugely dominant scrummaging ones at the moment. Maybe Kitsoff would be the closest. The Aussie loose heads, I mean, Slipper was a captain but conceded 1 million penalties. The All Blacks, to be honest, to Groot, he came along really well and he's probably really unlucky not to get picked as well. So I would say the Southern Hemisphere is doing all right for loose heads without having like the most dominant, although Stephen Kitsoff, as I said, probably right up there. Tight head. Speaking of dominant, I went with the big South African scrummaging machine that is Frans Malherbe. Now he gets a lot of stick for not being that busy around the park, and he's essentially only in the team for his scrummaging. And if you are going to pick a prop, I would go for one that's good in the scrum rather than one that's around the park in the first instance. If you can get them both combined, then kind of happy days. I mean, Malherbe, 5 tackles a game for him is actually pretty decent. He is getting around the park. He was like the 3rd most carries, I think, meters per carry for tight head props in the competition. So I do think he upped his work rate, which is really pleasing. Although minutes-wise, remember the South African props tend to get subbed a wee bit earlier, so he can kind of go guns blazing. And then, not have to kind of drain that 70, 80-minute tank. He doesn't concede many penalties a game, man. What can I say? He's just, he's a proper unit. And if you want a guy to pack down your scrum and hopefully either win you a penalty or make sure you guys get out of your own territory safely, I would say Malherbe is the guy. For the bench guy, I went with Alan Alatoa from the Wallabies. He was phenomenal. More than 8 tackles a game, the most of all the tight heads who played more than one game. Tackling in the 90s, only conceded 3 penalties. Busy with his carrying, if not that much over the gain line, but Alatoa was also phenomenal. Lomax, also pretty good. So yeah, propping stocks in the Southern Hemisphere, I think are actually looking pretty decent. A couple of the New Zealand props stepped up. The Argentinians blooded a few. So again, like apart from the South Africans, on paper anyway, I'm not sure that I would pick any of the Southern Hemisphere guys for a World 15 just yet, but encouraging signs anyway. Hooker, I went with another South African and Malcolm Marx. Malcolm Marx, goodness gracious me, man. The dude. I wanted to look at his numbers because I was like, Takiaho's going to have him ball in hand and Malcolm Marx is going to have him defensively, but it didn't actually work out like that. Their numbers are kind of neck and neck. Like Takiaho had 8 defenders beaten, Marx had 7. Marx gets 20 metres a game, Takiaho gets 19, so it's kind of a muchness. And then you add on top of that, Malcolm Marx's like tackling is phenomenal. He wins 9 turnovers like first in the competition. So the guy is absolutely putting his hand up for the best player in the world, or at least the best player in his position. There's heaps of good hookers around the world, to be honest. And speaking of Taukei'aho, he's my bench guy, 100%. Like, if you wanted to pick Taukei'aho in your team, I would not blame you, man. 5 tries, most carries for any of the hookers, 19 meters a game, like I mentioned. Plus, both these guys had good lineouts as well. So, plus, outside of these two, you got like the Montoya as well, who was also pretty phenomenal. I do think Southern Hemisphere teams, even the Aussie too, are looking pretty good at the moment. Actually, we've got some of the best hookers in the world at the moment. But Marks is my starter, and Taukei'aho is my bench guy. So that's your kind of front row. Locks, I ended up going with one of the Springboks guys. This is 3 in a row, isn't it? An old Lut Diaka. He's a busy guy in the air, isn't he? He's just one of the most commanding presences you will see aerially taking any line-out ball. The most line-out wins of the competition. A couple of line-out steals, so he's behind Etzebeth in the line-out steals, but he still bags a couple. 2 clean breaks, which is the most of any of the locks. The guy gets himself into some space. Get those big legs running. 10 tackles a game, tackling in the 90s like Diaka, man. Phenomenal shift from him. He is he just continues to be gold for the Springboks. And then alongside him, I went with an All Black. Finally get an All Black on the board. Old Sam Whitelock. Sam Whitelock rolling back the years. He gets the most turnovers of any of the locks, more than double, I think, the nearest best guy, because Whitelock had 5. So pretty dominant, getting 8 tackles a game, so he's just behind Diaka. His tackling numbers are also pretty bloody high. 4 defenders beaten, I think, is the most of any of the locks. So ball and hand stuff, he is equally phenomenal. Bench lock, I actually went with Big Thomas Lavanini. 11 tackles a game from him, I think, is the most average tackles from a lock. I mean, the Argentinian guys generally had to make more tackles than everybody else, but he's also got a really high tackle rate. He only gets 1 yellow card, and that was a team one rather than, I think, anything kind of, brain explosion stuff. I think he's got the most carries of any of the locks. Lavanini had a really good competition as well. And I mean, this is leaving out guys like Etzebeth, Retallick, like the Aussie locks as well. Swain, despite his suspension-inducing moment, you know what I mean? I think for locks, also the Rugby Championship teams were looking pretty good. So, yeah, there you go. It's an area of pretty decent depth. Speaking of decent depth, loose forwards, man. Loose forwards, it's a tricky one. I ended up going with a Wallaby on the blind side. As a bit of a cheat, although he did start 1 game there, is Rob Valentini. I had to get him into the team. It was just a matter of what position. Was he going to be 6, 8, or on the bench? I managed to get him in at 6. And 6 is kind of a weird position where a lot of teams played multiple guys. I think only the Pumas really kept their back row anything like stable. But the All Blacks had a couple of different guys. The Boks had some. They moved around Mostert, and they moved Peter Steff around. The Wallabies moved Valtini and Leota around a bit. So Valtini at least got all the games in. He's got 4 turnovers won. That's his defensive shift. He's got 4 clean breaks, which is the most of any of the Lucies. I think equal with Juan Martin Gonzalez. He's got 8 defenders beaten. He's only just behind Savia. Like, the dude's carrying was phenomenal. Just seeing that guy as their kind of line-out option, just to be steaming along with the ball, was very pleasing. So, yeah, I thought getting through his work, both ball in hand and defensively, very pleasing stuff for Valentini. He's showed that potential for quite some time, but finally getting up there. Open side, I went with a more defensively orientated player in Sia Kolisi. I think he's a little bit underrated from this competition thus far, but I mean, 6 turnovers won is second only to Malcolm Marx and certainly the most of any of the loose forwards. The guy was pilfering. 10 tackles a game is the most of any of the open sides who played more than 1 game. And he's in the 90s, I think, for his tackle percentage. And he beats 8 defenders, which is like the second equal, I think, of all the flankers. So, quietly, man, very defensively solid. I know we don't like the kind of sexy We do like the sexy ball and hand stuff. We don't really give the credit to the guys who just get through millions of tackles and get turnovers as much. But Kolisi, man, probably saved the Box skins on more than one occasion in this tournament. And then that means at number 8, I get to choose old Ari Savia. He missed one game when he was on baby watch, but man, I've said it a million times. Even when the All Blacks don't look good, he continually looks good. He's like the offload king. He's got way more offloads than anybody else in the back row. He gets a couple of try assists plus a try of his own. He's getting 9+ tackles a game. So equally very busy defensively. For defenders beaten, I think he's only behind Jasper Wiese. Wiese was a proper unit, ball in hand, but Savia was 9. And like getting 40 run meters a game. Like the guy is just very busy, very hard to bring down. So yeah, that's the back row. And then I went with the aforementioned Juan Martin Gonzalez for my bench guy. I initially had him starting, but I shifted him out to make room. 4 tries, the most of any flanker, that's for sure. 29 meters a game, the most of any flanker. 9 tackles a game. He's just kind of behind Kolisi, similar to Savia. Yeah, man, the guy was, I think he won 12 lineouts. The guy was doing a big wins, turnovers. Like, that guy was a revelation for Argentina. He really stepped it up this season. Still a very young man. That step on Willy LaRue will be a highlight reel one for quite some time. But yes, certainly back rowers, we are stocked with them in the Southern Hemisphere. And maybe the Northern Hemisphere as well, to be honest. I mean, back rowers, I guess, with their physique, a lot of teams that aren't that good, he honestly seem to have a lot of good back rowers. Like, I mean, Kremer, who was absolutely phenomenal. Matera, Wiese, like I mentioned, like the number 8s, I think bar none, number 8 was the most competitive position for sure. You could genuinely pick any of the 4 teams' main starting guys and justify putting them in. The number 8s were absolutely phenomenal. But yes, there you go. There's your forwards. Now we go from what I reckon is the most competitive position at number 8 to one that's kind of a bit of a roll of the dice. Halfback. Who do you go with? There's not one real outstanding guy. I went with Jaden Hendrickson. I mean, you could easily go for Aaron Smith with his passing game. Bertrand, I thought, had some good shifts, but they're not that consistent. Nick White as well, bit of a controversial pick if you want. But Hendrickson, mainly the separating factor I've put with him is that he's really stepping up to the plate in terms of a young man. Really getting a first run of starts, because I honestly don't think there's much between the halfbacks. I don't think any of them were particularly outstanding. Obviously, Hendricks's key point is his kicking game. It's not always 100%, but it's pretty on song. The Moody try is an absolute highlight of that one where he kicks it, the high aerial ball for Moody, but he's certainly the most kicking 9 of the competition. And he also backs himself to score some tries, man. He gets a try where he dummies and goes. He gets another one which becomes a penalty try because he gets tackled in an offside position. He gets the try assist, which is the Moody try. He makes 22 tackles and misses 4, so defensively he's not bad. Like meters per carry wise, he's right up there with the halfbacks. I think he might have been number 1, even ahead of Kubeli. So yeah, halfbacks, really difficult one to pick because, as I said, I don't think anyone was hands down better than anybody else, but you could certainly justify any of them. Bench guy, I went with Kubeli because I figure if you're going to go Smith, he's got to be the starting guy. Kubeli, I thought, with the most running game like stats, like he's got like 6 defenders beaten, which is top. He's got the most runs. He was getting 10 meters a game. Like in terms of just like coming off the bench, he didn't come always off the bench, but when he came off the bench, he was trying to impose himself on the game. I think if you are going to add an impact guy, you go with Kubeli. But I won't argue with it if you wanted to pick someone else, like Smith, just to justify it. But there you go. 10, I would be surprised to see many people picking anyone else other than Mo'unga. I don't think you can pick Carreras above Mo'unga, and the other 2 teams used multiple guys. It's pretty hard to justify the other guys off like 2 games. You know what I mean? Like Pollard played what? 2 or 3? Quaid got a game. Foley got a couple of games. Loloseo got a couple of games. Like, it's pretty hard to justify anybody else. And I don't mean to take anything away from Mo'unga, because Mo'unga was really good. I think Mo'unga's kind of solidified himself into the 10 jersey, keeping Bowden as either 15 or 23, 22. But yeah, 30 metres a game, scores a try, beats 15 defenders. I mean, Willemse was right up there for the South Africans in terms of defenders beaten. But yeah, Mo'unga, I thought, you know, he was just good, man. Good balance, nice balance of kick, pass, run. I think he's doing really well. But as I said, that was kind of a very straightforward one because nobody else really got consistent game time apart from Carrera. So there you go. Where do I reckon 9s and 10s are in the Southern Hemisphere? Obviously, DuPont is kind of the bar that everything's getting measured by at the moment. I don't think anyone is close to him just yet from the South. And 10s, it just really depends on who's fit, doesn't it? Like Quaid, when he's fit, can really pull the strings. Pollard was kicking the house down when he was playing before he got injured. So even Carreras is coming along nicely. We didn't get to see as much of his running game as we did against Scotland, but yeah, 10 is still an interesting one as well. I'm not sure any of the Southern Hemisphere guys are the first name off the team sheet in a World 15 for number 10 anyway. But there you go. Midfielders, kind of an easy one, I think. I went with old Damon de Allende at 12, and I'd be surprised many people not to pick de Allende because he was very imposing. The guy's got massive leg drive, man. 17 defenders beaten across the competition, 2 tries, 3 clean breaks, averaging over 5 meters a carry. Like, the guy's a big unit, isn't he? 42 tackles, misses 12 is maybe the darkest spot. Like, that's not the top tackling percentage. And people criticize him for not passing enough. He's got 42 runs, 22 passes, and 7 kicks. Not a single offload, at least what the stats said. So that's surprising because if you think about some of the top guys, like Sonny Bill used to be able to draw 2 guys in and then pop the ball away. That's an easier said than done thing because Sonny Bill was like an elite level offloader with a rugby league background. But imagine if Delaney just popped the odd offload, as he's doing the contact, because he's really good at taking the contact. But still, even without the crazy offloading game, the guy was really hard to stop. Like one of those tries he scored was just leg drive, man. The guy's a unit. So yeah, I think you'd be very happy with him for the most part. If you're a Springboks fan, I certainly wouldn't put him there if I didn't think he was good value. And then the other one is another kind of critiqued guy at times, is Rico Ioane, another guy who gets critiqued for not passing it that much. He's got 44 runs and 25 passes. So also a guy who likes taking the ball to the line more than he does necessarily passing the thing. But I mean, his numbers are also incredible. 25 defenders beaten is top in the comp. Beats 7 defenders, gets 65 meters a game. Like, his offensive numbers are just phenomenal. He gets a try assist. Makes 31 from 34 tackles, which is actually pretty good. Yeah. I mean, his passing game is still not complete. And I'm a Blues fan. I love the guy. He's got absolute wheels, but he's doing all right, isn't he? I think he's come along pretty well. Doesn't really have a kicking game. I don't think he really kicked it. I guess the one thing where Dale Lindes kind of got him as the kicking option. But anyway, both those guys I think did pretty well. And I think if you're going to pick another midfielder, you go with Ikitau from the Wallabies. I think Ikitau was generally good value, dangerous attacking option, distributor. Especially without Karevi, they're kind of missing that big gun, but Ikitau I thought stood up pretty well, so there you go. Wings. Wings is tough. I ended up going with an Aussie and Marika Korombete. Now, if you wanted just like all-out attack, then you obviously pick Caleb Clark because he is absolutely a barnstorming runner, very hard to bring down, very quick, but certainly not a complete player. So I think in terms of an overall game, I think Marika has got Caleb, but as I said, it just kind of depends on what you want to go for. Not the pure offensive stats like some of the other guys, like 30 run meters. I think Caleb was like 60 a game. He gets a try and a try assist. He's second only, though, to Clark for defenders beaten. So don't underestimate Marika's ability to carry the ball. And he does love an offload. He's like the top offloading winger. He's, again, guys with like rugby league background tend to have that skill set in them. And I think he had the most like turnovers won for outside backs as well. But also the stuff that the stats doesn't cover is just his work rate to run all day long. Like, I mean, I know the controversial tackle on Mapimpi in the corner, rubbed a few people the wrong way, but even if forgetting to tackle, just his commitment to steam across the field like that is phenomenal, and he does it all game. So, yeah, that guy's commitment to the jersey is huge, and coaches just love a high work rate player, so it's kind of hard not to pick him. Right wing, I went with Will Jordan. The only other guy I was thinking of was Emiliano Boffelli. Will Jordan's certainly another one of those kind of offensively minded players. He did get shown up a few times defensively and a couple of times under the high ball for certain. But I mean, 50 run meters a game. I think he's pretty much only second to was it Caleb Clark in terms of wingers. He gets 2 tries. He gets 2 try assists. His clean breaks are only second to Mapimpi out on the left wing. I forgot to mention Mapimpi is another option for sure. 30 tackles and 9 missed is certainly one that could be better, but the guy does some magic stuff. When the guy gets any kind of space, he makes guys look stupid on defense. Like that step for him on Callaway, brutal. Absolutely brutal stuff. So Will Jordan certainly does things that nobody else seems to be able to do at the moment. Is he a complete player? As I said, no. Would I love to see him get a crack at fullback? Yes. But, you still got to love watching him play. And then fullback, I went with Geordie Barrett. I know he switched to 12 for that final game. But Geordie was pretty good for most of the Rugby Championship, wasn't he? Sometimes he wasn't kind of outstanding, but just kind of cruising. That big old boot of his at the back. He kicked a lot of ball. And he's got a big boot. 50 metres a game for run metres is the top among the guys who played fullback. 14 defenders beaten across the comps, the most of the fullbacks. 2 tries, 2 try assists. And then he looked bloody good when he played number 12. So, Geordie Barrett, man. Very, very talented player. And then to squeeze in one last guy on the bench, because I got one more spot, I ended up putting Lakanyo, which would mean if this was a real team, you'd have to put Geordie Barrett at 10 if anything happened to Moonga. But Lakanyo only played 3 games, but his impact on the game was phenomenal. In those 3 games, he still managed to try assist, averaging 60 run meters a game. He ended up with 6 clean breaks in 3 games, and the top guy in the comp was Mapimpi with 8. So in half the games, he put in the 3rd or 2nd best performance in terms of clean breaks, man. Won a couple of turnovers as well. Talking about impact for a limited number of games. I tried to pick guys who played the majority of the comp, which ruled quite a few guys out, but I had to sneak in Lakanyo because remember he can cover multiple positions as well. But there you go. Team of the tournament. Where are the outside backs looking, I think, in the rest of World Rugby? And the midfielders. Well, if Arm is fit, Delende's fit, for sure. South Africa certainly got one of the better midfielders. The Argentinian midfield is actually looking pretty good. Moroni, I thought, was really, really sharp. The All Blacks had their depth tested at midfield for sure, but Geordie Barrett's emergence at the end of the comp was good. And remember, the Aussies are missing Karevi as well, so I thought Paisami did pretty good. So, again, depending on the injury toll, does the Southern Hemisphere have World 15 midfielders? I think, as I said, if Arm is fit, he's probably the best 13 in the world. Or there's a few guys up north who might have something to say about it. And Damon Delende is certainly putting his hand up as well. Rico's getting there. It's hard to justify him at 13 just yet. I still feel wrong, but credit where it's due. He's coming right. And outside backs, well, I've kind of just summed it up, haven't I? They're not all complete articles. Mapimpi is still class, despite the fact that, he's supposed to be getting old and slow, but he still keeps kind of ticking along really nicely. Yeah, I think we're doing not too bad. Boffelli is certainly another one that I would like to mention as having a really outstanding tournament. But, yeah. Anyway, this video's already gone on for 23 minutes. Better wrap it up. You guys let me know your thoughts. Who would you have? Who do you reckon's a lock-in? And who do you reckon is certainly very changeable? And also, which positions do you think are genuinely the most competitive? For me, it's number 8. But also, the hooker situation is a very tight one in the Southern Hemisphere. Anyway, I'm going to head off. You guys have any thoughts? And I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.